of dead time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, should we do a 10-9-8-7-6?
Yeah, there you go.
All right. You see us, okay. All right, this meeting is called to order. Our first item of business is the minutes from the previous meeting. Pretty sure Jim hasn't had a chance to look at them.
I'm looking at it right now.
You didn't email these, did you?
I did not know, since we determined we were having the meeting
Right, it
late
was
on Friday, I kind of was.
such a quickie.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm good with it.
Okay,
Yeah, they look fine to me.
all right. Minutes are accepted as presented. We'll go on to item number 2, which is the poll book setup for the May 9th annual school election. Jennifer?
Okay. So for odd year school election, school districts have the option to do early and absentee voting only. And then we don't open up a polling location on election day or have ballots available on election day. In previous years, we've been able to set the poll books up so that those voters in the school districts that are early and absentee only are available in the poll book during that 1 week period of early voting. And then on election day, with the smart update, those voters then become ineligible. So if they show up
They're
to
grayed out.
well, yeah. And so there's no option for them to vote, but they appear in the poll book. And so if they do happen to come to a polling location, we look them up, we verify that their address is correct, we verify their eligibility, and then we just, let them know that there's not a ballot available for you today by having the poll book set up that way. So, and that has always worked well for us, and that's what we've done since 2016 and before with the different poll books. So this year when we went to set up our poll books, one, we do have a new poll book system, and the other one is I think that it's more complicated for ES&S. I'm not sure. They're just saying that they're not doing this anymore, but they don't have the ability to make those voters ineligible on election day. So we have a couple of options. One.
Yeah, so, and just to make clear, so the purpose of us making these voters ineligible is because it's an unopposed election.
Exactly. It's an unopposed.
So that's the reason. So people can vote early or absentee, but there's nothing to vote on because it's unopposed.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
As long as the candidate gets one vote, the candidate is elected. And even if the millage, let's say everybody votes no on it, it remains the same and there's no change in the millage. And so that's the reason behind early and absentee voting only. And it saves the school district money because they don't have a polling location open on election day. So all of our school districts have chosen early and absentee voting only. And we've already mailed out some absentee ballots to some voters in those particular school districts. With the poll book not being able to be set up to basically make those voters ineligible, we have a couple of options. One is to provide our poll workers with a list of school districts and precincts that aren't eligible, and then they can then let the voter know by looking at this list. That was ES&S's suggestion. I said that no. So that was one suggestion.
That's a really unacceptable suggestion from
Yes.
ES&S, the
Yes.
software company who has the state contract to run our elections.
Absolutely.
That we should use paper and
Yes.
pencil to
Yes.
look at a list of precincts. Give me a break.
I would
Right?
say this is their attempt to say, well, we don't really want to work on this.
Yeah, I agree, Renee.
Because there's not enough places maybe where it would be affected. But it's an unacceptable response.
Yeah.
So that obviously is not a viable option.
Yeah.
Our two actual real options are to our poll books will have those voters as eligible on election day. So that's basically what our poll workers are going to see when the voter comes in to vote. They're going to pull the voter up. The voter will be printed out a ballot. So the option we have is to, right now we have our express votes set up that have all the precincts on it and all the ballots available. Just because that's the way early vote is set up, and it's just easier when we set up vote centers because you make all the sticks exactly the same so that they all work exactly the same no matter what stick we use for that express vote. That voter then would come in, be issued a ballot, would go over to the express vote, and no one would know any difference, that they weren't eligible to vote, that they just go through the process, and our poll workers, there's no extra work for our poll workers on that end. However, by law, these school districts have said that they're choosing early and absentee voting only, and and so that there shouldn't be a ballot available on election day.
Does the law say that?
The law doesn't technically say that part of it, I don't think. But when I did talk to the SBEC, their suggestion was, well, can you make the express votes not have that ballot available? And yes, we can, because we're a PYO county. We can go back and reburn everything. So the second option would be just exactly that. The express votes can be set up so that they only have the ballots available that for election day voting. So that would be the Springdale School District, the Fayetteville School District, Lincoln School District, only because the city of Lincoln is having a special election, and then it would have the city of Springdale and Taneytown, but that's all part of the Springdale School District. It would only have those ballots available on the express vote. So when the voter comes in to vote, they'll check in, they would be given a ballot, but when we go over to the express vote, there will not be a ballot available for that voter. So then we'll have to explain to the voter, I'm sorry, there's not a ballot available for you, even though we've done this whole process where we've given you a ballot. And then our numbers on our poll books will be off because we've shown we've issued a ballot, but we don't actually have a ballot that's going into the DS200.
None of those are good options.
No, they're not.
Those are our, but
you're saying this only affects a handful, maybe.
If those voters come in to vote. The odds of someone from Greenland School District showing up at a polling place to vote, I don't even know if we would have anyone come in. It would be different if, for instance, Fayetteville School District was having just a zone election, and someone from Fayetteville showed up to vote thinking they were in that zone. But Fayetteville's is at large, Springdale's is at large. And so we're talking about the possibility of maybe 3 voters, 5 voters, if any, coming in to vote. I just don't see that it's that much of an issue in regards to what the problem is.
There's not a specific acceptable, workable solution. So we're having to punt, if you will.
What about a fourth option? I mean, explain, I think I know the answer, but why can't we just not load those specific precincts for the election day voting in the poll books? Because it sounds like the poll books will have these ineligible voters in them, but the express votes won't have it loaded. So we're going to check, you could just check somebody in and then they go to vote, but there's nothing on the ballot. Why can't we just not include them in the poll books?
Because that's the problem on ES&S's side. ES&S says we either have to include all of the precincts because they're early and absentee voting as well. And so the poll book set up for early vote out of the poll book set up for early vote and election day has to be exactly the same. So our options are to not include those voters at all, but they do have the option to come early and absentee vote, and we are sending out absentee ballots already. And so,
You can't somehow just load the list of,
no.
you know, I don't know the technical side of it, but we get the county clerk issues us the list of
Right.
eligible voters for the election.
Right, and that, I've already asked that specific question. Why can't we have two data sets,
Yeah.
basically?
Yep.
A data set for early vote and a data set for
Because
election
we're
day.
tabulating them and reporting them separately on election night anyway.
Right, but they said the poll books can't be set up that way.
Or they won't set
Or
them
they
up.
won't set them
Mhm.
up, but we do have to
Yet.
make it.
Can't be set up that way yet.
Yeah,
But-
it just doesn't seem, I guess, you know, like why.
So I have a question. What if we do let them vote? And then we deal with those ballots here?
So those ballots, if we let them vote, they'll go into the DS 200. They don't change the outcome of the race because
There's nothing there.
it's a single candidate, no
Right.
change in the millage.
Right.
The only thing it does change, and we can control this, a lot of times early and absentee voting is to save the school district money by not charging them for an
Right,
election day site. So when I do my calculations for the cost of the election, I can not include the
Because
ballots
they've
that were
chose- they've
cast
chosen
on
to only
election.
pay for- yeah.
Exactly,
Oh,
because
yeah.
I will know which ballots were cast early, and so those would be the ballots cast to figure out what their cost is, and not include the ballots cast on election day. And so that would be a good solution to it, because our poll workers won't have to do anything extra.
Oh, yeah, that's.
The voter who comes in to vote will get the right ballot.
And they
Yeah.
won't know any
And
difference.
they won't know any different, and then only to be told that they weren't eligible to vote that day. This is why school elections, like all the things that the state looks at in regards to fixing elections, this is one of the most important ones, and it is complicated by having the requirement constitutionally of having the millage on the ballot every
Right,
year.
yeah.
And so that's why we get this mix of laws that work in an odd year and then work in an even year. And then we have this mess of the poll books and all of that.
I like what Jim is suggesting simply because it doesn't create any concern for the voter that somehow their ballot has been rejected without understanding the circumstances behind it.
Yeah, you can't issue somebody a ballot.
Exactly.
Let them go to the
Yeah.
express vote to vote,
Oh,
and then there's
sorry.
nothing to vote
No.
on. That's not a good solution.
No,
I
not
agree.
at all.
We could, I mean, there's just a small number, we could deal with them here, and we could even send them a letter to let them know how it was handled.
Sure. So I guess my question is, what's going to happen when this is a bigger issue at
yeah,
another
good
election in
question.
the future? Because if we let ES&S slide on not addressing this now, we're going to have to deal with it when it's not just single digit or zero
Yeah.
voters. It could be hundreds of voters if it's
So,
a different election.
so I think legislatively is the fix for this. This whole mix of some school districts doing early and absentee voting and some school districts being open on election day is what causes the issue. And I know there's been some legislation that's been proposed, and it hasn't really gone anywhere, to have the candidates for school board run in even years and not have candidates run in odd years, so that in odd years, only the millage is being dealt with.
You're talking about changing when and how the elections are run.
Exactly.
It seems like a pretty easy software fix to me. That
Yeah,
AS&S
I
has
agree.
been doing this
I
for
agree.
over a decade for us,
Mm-hmm.
and then all of a sudden they can't do it.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure, maybe a legislative fix, but it's a legislative fix forcing ES&S to address this software problem.
Yeah.
Well, I agree
You
with
know,
that.
what's the SBEC doing about this? Aren't they supposed to be the end of our support for this type of issue? We're not the only county that's going to be dealing with this.
Yeah.
We're
Right.
not, and I did let I did let the SBEC know that this is an issue. And when I talked to ES&S on the phone on Friday, they were getting in touch with the other counties that will also be having this issue. We're not the only county that is dealing with this
Yeah.
because all of us, at least I know myself and I know Benton County, we set up our elections as we've set them up every single year, not expecting that there to be an issue with the poll books in this regard. And so, we started getting word last week, hey, we can't do your poll books like we've done them in the past. And we're like, why can't you? And is there not a fix? And so we tried to think of solutions for them. One was doing the 2 data sets. Couldn't do the 2 data sets. The other one was, at least I thought would work, was why can't they just assign the precincts that are voting election day to just those polling sites that are open on election day? For whatever reason, they couldn't do that. So we tried to give them several solutions to fix the problem on their side of it and how the poll books are set up, and they kept coming back to us saying, well, the software, basically the software doesn't allow it, or we can't do it. And so
Non-responsive.
Yeah, they just don't want to deal with it, like you said.
Software doesn't allow it. Does that sound like AI?
So, and I think part of it is when you look at the big picture, maybe they're saying, oh, well, it's only impacting
It's not important enough.
a handful of voters in the sense that they don't typically show up to vote. We typically don't see them, and
Right.
we don't see voters from other school districts showing up to vote on election day. Like West Fork is not going to show up in
Right.
Fayetteville somewhere and try and vote, most likely. But you have to have a plan for those
You do.
voters.
Yep.
And you have to do it. It's too late for us to do it now because absentee ballots have already gone out. The school districts also had the option to choose election by candidate, where the candidate comes in and just votes for themselves, and we don't create ballots. But none of the school districts who gave them that option chose that option. I don't know if it was because it was relatively new or just something they didn't want to do. They wanted to just do the early and absentee voting only. It's too late for us to go back simply because we've been sending out absentee ballots, at least in my mind, I think.
Would that address it in the future?
It
But
would
doesn't-
address-
It doesn't address the millage.
It doesn't, no,
But it would address some of the issues.
it
Yeah.
would. The millage part of it, basically that candidate would be voting for the millage. And so then you wouldn't have
Millage
to,
isn't going to change no matter what. The
Exactly.
candidate just
Right.
isn't going to change. They just need one vote.
one vote.
So
But if
we
there's
could,
not a candidate and there is a millage,
If there's no candidate and no change in the millage, this is where it even gets worse. So this is what Sebastian County is dealing with. Sebastian County has a school district that has no candidate and no change in the millage, so they are opening up early and absentee voting just for people to come in and vote on the millage.
that won't change no matter what.
That won't change no matter what.
This is the law, right?
Yeah.
And
constitutionally.
possibly, I think Benton County will have to deal with that in the fall because they don't have any slated Bentonville School District candidates up for election. So they'll do early and absentee voting for a millage. That's not going to change. This is school, like they should have just a whole special session on how to fix school elections. Because this is part of trying to piecemeal fixes for the school elections.
So the solution we've talked about is
that's
there,
for this election.
Yeah.
We
Is
need to
there-
deal with this election.
Yeah, is there a statute that the SBC is concerned about?
The
That
statute,
said, that would prohibit us from doing it that way?
the one was that the school district has chosen to do early and absentee voting only instead of having any polls open on election day. So
So
they're not having polls open on election day.
But does the school district ultimately by statute, get to make that decision?
Yes,
They do.
yes.
We don't get to make that decision.
No. their school board passes a resolution making that decision.
So we didn't become aware of any of this until the end of last week because of ESNS. Again, the state chosen software vendor for the election.
Right, and we only became aware of it because we received our poll book data.
Right.
And I was talking with them about the poll book data, like, will you be able to make them ineligible, come Tuesday morning, election morning, they then flip and they become ineligible. And they said, we can't do that this year. And I said, well, that's a problem. And so, yeah, we've been trying to figure
Did they
out
actually
something.
say we can't do that this year? So maybe,
In previous years, they've always been able to do it.
okay.
They didn't give a specific reason. Was it this is a new program, or was it we just don't have the staff, or we just don't want to do it, or give
It
me a
was too
reason?
hard.
Yeah.
So
Clearly it was too hard.
I at first think it was our poll books we do have the new software for poll books.
Oh, yeah.
As opposed to the other county, because we got the new
So
poll
that's
books.
where the problem you think lies?
They're not doing it for the other counties either.
Okay.
So even on the old software.
Oh.
Wow.
So yeah.
So it was capable of that, but it is no longer capable of that.
Yeah. Even with the new poll books.
Yeah. So
Software
but I think if we choose to
programming.
just let those voters vote, we can, when we bill the school districts, not bill them for any votes cast on election day. And that's
Yeah.
easy enough for us to be able to do.
And that's an acceptable solution for this election or any future elections if the situation continues to be this way.
I mean,
The problem exists.
or we can reach out to the school districts in advance and encourage them to do the candidate by election,
Yeah.
or a candidate by election option. So,
Yeah.
What kind of warning is there for them to be able to do that? I mean, what kind of decision do they need to make, and how quickly, or maybe I should say, how far in advance?
So I always send that information out to them before filing starts with
Oh, okay.
a pre-printed resolution for them that they can choose the options, and I include the law on it and let them know that these are your options.
Yeah.
We have to know that before we finish setting up the election, because it determines which precincts we include in the election. Because if Greenland School District wasn't going to be, early and absentee, we wouldn't have even put them in, made a ballot for them,
Right,
basically. So that's the kind of decision they have to make really before we get ballots approved. So
Gotcha.
it's a pretty early on decision that the school districts make.
Okay.
And if we presented it in a way that there will be additional costs associated with not choosing just the candidate only voting, if,
Right.
because we're no longer able to do it the way we used to with early and absentee only.
Right. Yeah,
And
they
that,
might,
they
they
may
might be
all choose-
persuaded at that point
Yeah.
to choose that option.
Well, and a lot of times when they get the bill for early and absentee voting, it's for like $5.
Yeah.
So even because it's
well-
based on the amount of votes cast, that's why I'm saying.
But if we tell them we can't do it that way anymore, and it's gonna be a portion of the whole,
Yeah.
in the future, the
Yeah.
whole election.
But that is in the law, though, that they can do.
It's in the law that basically they choose early and absentee voting so that no polls are open on election day, which we are not opening up a poll, like in
No,
Elkins.
no,
We
no.
are not opening up a poll in Elkins, or Greenland or West Fork. But basically those voters, there would be a ballot available for them on election day if they do happen
If
to
they
come to
show
the
up.
polls.
Yeah.
Right now, when I was talking to ESNS, and I'll have to visit with the county clerk afterwards, I think there's a way for us to mark in voter view
Oh, good.
those precincts that are early and absentee voting only, so that if they go to voter view to look at their sample ballot, it'll note next to their name or next to their precinct that this is an early and absentee only election for you, basically, and this would be where you could early vote. So
Yeah, if that can happen, that would be good.
Yeah, and that was an option that ES&S that we did discuss on the voter view side of it.
Okay.
So,
Okay, so, as I understand it, what y'all are preferring, and what I suppose we need to have a motion on this, is you do early and absentee, but if somebody shows up on election day to a polling site, even though they should only have gone early and absentee, they're gonna be issued a ballot, and it's gonna go through the machine, and it's gonna mark them as having voted. And we're not gonna have any angst over that.
right, they won't even know because
Right.
they'll check in, they'll get their ballot issued to them, they'll go over to the express vote, the ballot will pull up and put it in the DS-200.
And it will basically be a clerical issue that we deal with here.
We
For
will
the-
deal with here, on camera.
Yeah.
So that it'll be public.
And nothing could possibly change any result of the election because
Good point. Yeah.
because there's
One way or the
one
other.
thing, there's no contested election. you
Right.
know?
Right,
We're
Yeah.
just forced
Yeah.
by the Arkansas Constitution to hold the election.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I will entertain a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
So I guess the question is, addressing this moving forward. The legislature's only in session once every 2 years. We're gonna come up against this again soon, and so what do? ES&S has offered this before, they just don't wanna offer it again.
Yeah.
They need to offer it because we need a solution long-term when this situation is gonna affect a lot of folks. So I guess the question is, how do we wanna address it?
I think, you're exactly right, but I've also heard, this morning that, there's potentially a legislative solution. Is there anything in the current, new law that has been put forth, and that's under consideration that would have any effect on this issue?
There is one that was filed last week, at the end of last week, a bill that would have school boards, basically school boards are elected to 5-year terms, and it would change their term to a 4-year term, so that could then put them on an actual 2-year rotation, and the school board members would then be elected they would be on the primary election in an even year, and then this one even has their runoff election not being until the general election. So even year school board candidates, just like municipal candidates, would be on the ballot, and then in an odd year, you would only have the millage.
Okay.
And that bill
That
has
might
been
correct it
proposed.
then.
Yeah, now there's several versions of it out there, and I haven't been following all of them that close. One would have them run as partisan candidates, but this particular one that was filed doesn't mention anything about them running as partisan candidates, but it treats them like the judges, basically, and that they would be on even years instead of every year.
Is that gonna fix the millage issue here, though?
It will not fix the millage issue, but with the millage issue, we would only have to do early and absentee voting only. So basically, we're creating an election in an odd year for the millage, and we just do early and absentee voting only. And so, but I
There
think,
could not be any other election at the same time as that
no, there
odd year.
can be.
Yeah, so
because,
it could happen again.
Yeah.
If they have a contested race, they still are open on election day. In an odd year, you wouldn't have a contested race because they're only elected in the even years. That's what this new bill would propose.
There couldn't be a special election on that same day?
There would be a special election on that same day, which is not a big deal in
It
this.
could still affect some voters though, right, with the same situation? in
Yeah,
theory?
like what Lincoln is,
Yeah.
the situation we have in Lincoln. Because, for instance, Lincoln has, the city of Lincoln is having a special election, but it's not the whole entire Lincoln School District. And so that millage, then you would have to Yeah, you're right.
I don't know.
You're
just,
right.
You know,
There's not a fix
the
for it.
software company offered this before. They can offer it again. They just
Yeah.
don't want to do
Yeah.
it. So
Yeah.
it seems like other bills maybe could affect parts of it. But
Parts of it.
I guess my real question is, do we want to, you know, formally ask the SBEC to ask somebody to sponsor a bill to fix this? Or do we ourselves just want to ask some legislators to sponsor a bill to fix this specific issue? Require the software company to allow this, to provide this option
Which
again
they used to provide.
Which they used to provide until, you know,
Yeah.
recently they chose not to.
I think we need to ask the SBEC, the question you just asked, of those two options.
I'd go a step further. I'd suggest that, or request the SOS to put their thumb on that. Because they're the ones that
That requires.
purchase the
yeah.
software.
Yeah.
I would say that would be, I think we ought to look for all actions.
Yeah.
I think the SBEC and the SOS, I think we need to put pressure on both, if we can, what pressure we can, on both organizations so that they can in turn put pressure on the legislature and ES&S.
Yeah, nothing's going to get ES&S, I agree. Nothing's going to get their attention like a bill filed. That's going to force them to do it
Yeah.
in a short amount of time.
Yeah.
That's going to get their attention, right? That'll get their lobbyists' attention. But I agree, Jim. We should contact both the SBEC and the SOS, ask them to run a bill to address this issue, and if they don't do it, I think we consider asking a representative to do it ourselves. You know, I'm happy to ask somebody. Probably the bill is not going to have as good a shot if I ask somebody from my party to run it as you guys, but it could be bipartisan. I mean, however you want to address it. I just think maybe that's the next step.
The problem
if
I
it's not
see
addressed.
with that is that this is such a convoluted issue that almost all of our state reps or senators are going to go, I don't understand all the finer parts of it. And it's going to take time for the verbiage to specifically address what we're talking about.
The simplest solution, which is the one that we have asked for years, is a constitutional amendment to remove the millage requirement.
Yeah.
That's the straightforward
That's true.
fix.
That would be.
That it's, I mean, I know it's not a very
Fun
fun
one, yeah.
amendment.
It's not.
But
What would it do? What would it say?
it would just remove the requirement it would remove
if
the
there's no
requirement
change.
that the millage be on the ballot to be voted on if there's no change in the millage. And that would be it. And that would fix.
And that would be understandable to a legislator.
Well, why is the millage, let's talk about that. Why is the millage vote not on the regular election day? Why is it only on the primary?
It's not. It's whenever the school district decides to hold their election is when the millage question. So this year, which is an odd year, we're holding the election in May, which is the same month in an even year that the primary would be held. And so it's voted
Okay,
on
so that's-
every single year,
Okay.
even with no change.
Because I can see why the legislators would want the millage to be voted on, even if it wasn't changing, just so that the public knows that that's what it is, and it's, you know, I mean, I could see both sides of that issue. But it would seem to me that the regular election day is the one that is most, that we see the most activity, the most voters come out typically, you know, and seems to me that a regular election, a general election, whatever you want to call it, is really where we ought to be focusing most of the important stuff. but I don't know how you make that work. We got so many rules
Yeah, exactly.
to try to deal with.
Yeah. Well, I think Jennifer's right. If we could have someone sponsor a bill, you don't think it's going to happen?
It's not gonna make the cut.
They
That's
only
what,
get-
well,
You guys know.
I'm
it.
cynical,
It's
yeah.
a good,
Yeah.
it's a good
But it would,
suggestion.
okay, we're talking in an ideal world,
Yeah,
okay?
sure. Hey, I think it's the best practical solution,
But
but
the-
it won't.
But wouldn't that also have to be voted on by the public?
By the
since
public.
It's a constitutional amendment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're not
They're not
gonna,
gonna kick it as
no,
one of the
Yeah.
three.
no.
No.
I think, legislation will end this week.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
the goal.
Yeah.
You're not gonna get a bill in right now.
No,
No.
but we'll see where the one bill is for
Yeah.
for having the school boards go to 4-year terms. And
Yeah, I think we need to get through this election
You-
and the legislation and where the bills.
And then
the
we'll
laws
see.
are,
because
And then evaluate where we are.
because next year is
We
a
only got a shot
primary.
once every 2 years, however you guys wanna
Yeah.
handle it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, if you can get something written and sponsored between now and next week, it's gonna be tough. I'm
Oh,
telling you.
I think
Yeah.
they cut off filing too, though.
Oh,
on
I
You
bills.
can
think you're
always-
right,
you-
come to
they,
think
they,
of
I
it.
mean, they file a bunch of shell bills.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's how
that's
they
true.
always
Yep,
do
that's
it,
true.
and then
Yeah.
they amend them later.
Yeah.
Hey, it's fine. I know we're toward the end of the session. I just raised it because that's the
Yeah.
only way.
Yeah,
One of the only ways it
Right.
seems like ES&S is going to care enough to do
I-
something
I'm-
about this, but maybe not.
I'm doubtful they'll even care at that point.
Yeah.
well,
But-
you know what, ES&S is under some pressure, from the public and some folks
That's
are
true.
really, putting a lot of pressure on the election equipment companies and
Mm-hmm.
maybe, the Secretary of State's office can have a little extra power because of that. I don't know. Who knows?
I don't know. All right, so right now, we've got a temporary solution to, with what appears to be an ongoing problem. We will have to revisit this?
Yes, because even if we got legislation passed, it's too late for our election.
Right, true.
And then we have next year, it's not an issue because every polling location is open. And so school districts don't have that option to do early and absentee voting in an even
Yeah,
year.
yeah.
So
So what we need to do then is prepare for 2025 and get some legislation written and sponsored that hopefully would resolve this
Yeah. I
over
agree.
the long term.
Good point, and we can try to do that in like summer 2024.
Yeah,
Right, way ahead of time.
yeah,
Sounds good.
as if we won't have anything to do then, right? All right, well, let's move on to legislative update. Jennifer, what do you got?
So things are moving very quickly. Like I said, I think they're going to plan and try on ending up session by Friday. We do have one bill, SB 435, which is the bill that would allow a voter to request a paper ballot at the polls on election day. I think the attempt at this bill is that it's a compromise between voters who are pushing for hand-counted paper ballots, and that actually, not really getting a lot of momentum. And so this would be an option to allow voters to request that paper ballot at the polls, which sounds great.
We
And-
already do that. Everybody votes a paper ballot.
They do your express vote ballot, right? And they call it, they call it something else, a hand-marked ballot.
Yeah.
Or something like that. If this bill does make its way through, it is on the Senate floor to be voted on today.
And it has a due pass, right?
It has a due pass recommendation from committee. If this bill does make it through the House and does become legislation, it will cost the county over $300,000, potentially $500,000 just to get the BOD printer and the computer at every single polling location. And statewide, if you're looking at, so that's just our
Yeah.
county, if you're looking at statewide, ES&S being able to provide the printers and the computers and the training. You know, we wouldn't have to go through training because we've already had it. We have one BOD printer. Would they be able to implement that before the March primary? I don't know. That's a lot.
Does that have an immediate date on it?
It would be effective for 2024.
Oh, okay.
Essentially.
So
Okay.
you're talking, I mean, millions of
Yeah.
dollars.
Millions of dollars.
Did ESNS sponsor that bill?
No.
Sorry, that was a bad joke. Sorry.
I just took it. I was just like, no,
It's a good
no,
one.
they didn't.
Don't be sorry. It was a good.
Yeah.
But I just, you know, that one definitely is a concern in the sense of how do we do it and the money, because the state won't have the money. The counties themselves will have to come up.
put it up, yeah.
And I also think that part of it will be a licensing fee that the counties will also have to pay.
There you go.
There you go.
That the counties will also have to pay on each computer
Yeah.
every year.
Oh my goodness.
So it you know, potentially there is a significant cost to the counties
Yeah.
and to the state in
Ongoing.
regards to this bill.
Yeah.
So
It's not just the initial outlay, but it's the ongoing.
yeah. So
What else?
So what's the, is there any kind of a read on the chances that that bill's gonna pass?
I was a little surprised it made it through committee, but
Me
it
too.
did. When it gets to the Senate floor today, that's 30. You just have to convince 35 people on the Senate side. And in theory, it sounds like it's a great compromise. You know, like, hey, a county doesn't
Right.
want to hand count ballots because it's kind of, you know, very time consuming, and we know our equipment works. We have faith in
Right.
our equipment, but there are voters who don't trust the express vote ballot, and they want the ovals to be able to be filled in. And so it sounds like a wonderful compromise for those voters who have serious concerns. But when you get into the practical matters of it, there is a lot at stake there. And that hand-filled oval paper ballot will read through the exact same machine
Right.
that is set up to read the express vote ballot. So it's the same software. And the other option is if you went back to precinct-based voting to be able to provide the traditional type of paper ballot, you would then get into an area where voters since 2016 have been used to going to any location that they want to go to vote. If you go back to precinct-based voting, those voters who go to the wrong polling location will then have to go to an alternate site to vote. And if they don't and they choose to vote at that location, their ballot won't count. It'll be a provisional. So then that's at least 15 to 20% of our voters currently that take advantage of vote centers. And then you would also have to think about the implications of how many early vote sites could you open up, because early vote operates in that same manner.
You said you only had to convince, you have to convince 35 in the Senate, isn't it?
Well, there's 35
people,
senators.
so 18 is.
Right,
a
so-
majority.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Yeah.
Yep, you're right.
So whatever, that number is, that,
Yeah.
so I don't know if it'll make it through on the Senate side or not.
Okay, well, we need to watch that one, because if it makes it through on the Senate side, we've got to be looking at it because it's still got to go through the House.
It still
Right.
has to go through the House, and like I said, I understand the ask for the bill, but there's a practical side
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
as well.
Okay, what else you got?
There's 275, which is the electioneering bill. It is on the Senate floor to vote on as well today. It has been amended to allow polling sites to designate an area where electioneering could happen at. It does not specify where that designated area is. It just is a distance outside of the 100 feet. That one is on the Senate floor today as well. And then Senate Bill 35275 and Senate Bill the 235, which is the absentee voter integrity bill, which basically sets up a cure period That has made it through the Senate floor, and it'll work its way through the House side this week. This one would allow when a voter votes absentee, they fail to include their signature, they fail to, their birthday is wrong, allows that voter to come in and fix that problem. There's some just practical things in the bill, such as the notifying of the voters within 48 hours, but it requires the Election Commission to hold meetings almost essentially. So it would be something we would have to work out if this bill does make it all the way through in regards to how we canvass absentee ballots and how the voters are noticed or notified.
What was that number?
It's Senate Bill 235.
235.
Yeah, and that one's just another one. How do we do it?
Logistics.
Yeah, how do we make our way through? Those are kind of the last remaining ones that we've been watching.
Okay, can we go back to SB 275, please?
Sure.
I want to share with the committee and put on record some things I've been doing. I know that I'm very much in opposition to this bill. Since the last time we met, I did share our resolution with the Republican committee, because I actually shared it with the chairman, and he asked me to come and speak about it, which I did. And I've also learned that I knew that the SBC was supporting it, but in watching the Senate, state agencies, and governmental affairs meetings, the director of SBEC, Daniel Schultz, is helping or working, sitting side by side with Senator Hammer in those meetings in support of the bill. So I called Daniel Schultz.
Good.
And we had a really long, over an hour-long conversation. Actually, I emailed him and he called me back. Before I go any further and discuss that, I skipped over one thing. There is a final item at the bottom of this bill now with the new amendments, okay? The last part of it begins with a county board of commissioners shall. So we are being mandated also in this bill, not just the property owners. We are being mandated, and it says that we're going to ensure that the polling site permits this activity. And we're going to negotiate with the polling site to establish the area. We're going to, at the very last item says, the agreement entered into between the County Board of Election Commissioners and the polling site shall not apply to an adjacent landowner or property not specifically designated as a polling site. So this eliminates the use of, in my opinion, that language eliminates the use that some of these polling sites are doing now of public property that's adjacent to theirs. Would you agree with that language eliminates that?
I don't know, maybe. I'd have to look at the whole thing and see.
It says it shall not apply to adjacent landowner or property not specifically designated as a polling site.
This bill shall not apply to it?
No, the agreement entered between the County Board of Election Commissioners and the polling site.
So do our agreements ever? Don't they just?
No, but we're being mandated to do this, yeah.
Don't our agreements, yeah, I'm just trying to understand it. Our agreements are currently with whoever owns the property,
Right.
building, right?
Right.
Do they ever encompass other surrounding property?
No, but the we are mandated to ensure that, that they allow, the electioneering. It's gotta be outside of the 100 feet. They are not, I don't guess they have, the ability to, designate, when they're designated an area for, electioneering, to designate something off of their property. It has to be on their
Yeah,
property.
sure, definitely.
And this is specifically saying that we cannot designate something not on their property, is what it sounds to me like.
Yeah, okay, got it. We can't designate some other area outside of that to comply with giving them a place to electioneer. Got it, yeah. It does sound
Excuse
like
me
that.
if I am not clear on this, but it looks to me like, according to the way the bill is written, that there are only two things that the Board of Election Commissioners is mandated to do, and that is to ensure and to negotiate. Do you see that differently, Jim? There's only two subpoints on the mandate.
I see that it's ensure and negotiate.
So whatever follows after that refers back to F1. Am I wrong?
Yes, no,
I'm wrong?
this, let me look, yeah, you may be right, section 1, F1,
3, 4, and 5, which is below the mandate, but not subsections of the mandate, which is 2. You have a copy of it, Max?
I don't, I was trying to look it
You have
up.
another copy? No. Here, I think I actually have it on my phone.
I was trying
it's on
to
the
pull it
second,
up. Thank you.
it's at the bottom and then on the second page.
I think I've got it on my phone, so I
Yeah.
can look at it there. The way I read that, it only these two
These two
things
are
apply
To this
as
C.
mandates for A. No, C is a subpoint of this here.
Okay. Okay.
That's the way I read it.
2, a county board of election commissioners shall, and then it has the A and B,
Correct.
okay? Then 3, 4, and 5 are not under
No.
the mandate,
Not as I read them.
but the bill says that the agreement entered into between the county board of election commissioners and the polling site shall not apply to an adjacent landowner or property or nor specifically designated as a polling site. So to me, that seems to me that covers that, but I don't want to get bogged down into this because I have some important things to say, and we can talk
Yeah,
about how
yeah.
this is, laid out if you want to. But let me just tell you a little bit about the visit that I had with Director
Okay.
Schultz.
Sure.
Stultz or Schultz?
Schultz.
I keep getting that wrong.
Yeah.
We talked for over an hour, and we talked a lot about a lot of things. And it seems to me that not only during my discussion with Director Schultz, the questions that I got from the Washington County Republican Committee members and the discussions that I have seen occur on the recordings of the Senate SAGA committee have all been about primarily how to regulate the action of electioneering. While the whole time I've been saying to them what I consider to be the elephant in the room is the mandate. The mandate by the government in Little Rock to tell these vote centers, these private property owners, that they have to do this. They have to allow this to be able to be a vote center. I've gotten a lot of pushback on that maybe, mandate's not an important thing. So at the end of my conversation with Director Schultz, I said, why, and this is paraphrasing, I don't have exact language, I said, why is it that the mandate can't be treated in the bill the same as, or the electioneering cannot be treated in the bill the same as attached signage, in that it would be an option for the landowner, and if they allow one, they have to allow all. And his answer to me was basically, without the mandate, the bill doesn't exist. So I want you to let that sink in. Without the mandate, the bill doesn't exist. Really what that says is the whole purpose of the bill is to create the mandate. I don't ask any action by this committee. I just want you to know what I've been doing, what I've heard, and I want to put it on record that is why this bill exists. Thank you.
Okay. Well, this bill is supposed to be addressed today, and I actually see the bill differently from what you're talking about, a mandate. And this is we're kind of tardy on this simply because it is going to be addressed today, afternoon?
Yeah, it's on the Senate floor today.
Yeah. But we can hit this ball around all morning and not get a consensus on what it says. But I see the mandate as two different things. I do not believe, based on the way the bill, as I read it, it does not mandate that a polling site has to have signage. It, in fact, says...
This is not about signage,
okay.
Chairman, please.
Okay. But the same on the electioneering. Point 3 and 4 seem to... Well, no. I need to get my... Again, I'm not sure we need to spend the time hitting this around because of a disagreement that we have about what it says. But the only mandate that I see is not shall permit, yeah.
No, that's...
So looking at it, and I'm just looking at it, looks like to me like subsection F5 is that the purpose of that is so that no adjacent landowners have to allow any electioneering. I think that's what that does. And
Right.
F1, I think it does say a polling center or vote center shall allow, the type of electioneering that it establishes in A, B, and C. And it then says in 2, a county board of election commissioners shall ensure that before we choose a voting site, that it permits that specific type of electioneering. And it requires us to negotiate with the polling site to establish some area where there can be electioneering 100 feet from the primary entrance door. So it looks like we will have to, negotiate with sites to allow that if their property has more than 100 foot beyond the primary entrance door to come up with a site before we
On
can
their
choose it.
property.
On their property. It looks like it.
Yeah, and it's a mandate for them to do that.
I mean, yeah, we have to, that's the language, we have to
Yeah.
do it,
If you don't like the word mandate, then it's a law telling them they must do it, they shall do it. That's what the law says, it's what the bill says. It would be a law that they shall permit it. And everything written in here, most of it talks about the regulation of how electioneering is done, which I don't have a problem with defining how electioneering is to be done, and it's to be done fairly, for everybody.
Right.
My problem at the core is telling the private property owners that they must do it, and we will lose trust with them, and we will lose some of them because of it, I believe.
Okay. Well, keep working.
I'm doing it.
And let's see, did we have any other
That's
legislative
that's
stuff
the
to
only
discuss?
ones that I have marked.
Okay. All right, this is getting a little long here.
Okay.
Upcoming dates, have y'all got those written down? Any
Yeah, I think
problems?
so. Those haven't changed at all, have they?
No.
I think they're in my phone, but since I forgot it,
Okay, we have other business, and I believe Jennifer has some.
Oh, yeah, the only thing I wanted to share with the commission is we're doing poll worker training starting tomorrow and Wednesday. And I was gonna share this with the poll workers, because I know they probably are getting questions about the barcode on the ballot. So this is just, I did one when the regional meeting happened, but this is one specifically that we did for the school election. And I want to go over this a little bit with our poll workers, not for them to have a full understanding of it, but just to be able to, hey, if they get asked this question,
Assurance.
this is, an explanation, and I can go ahead, kind of work something up to put on our website as well, if you think that would be helpful, in regards to this question that keeps coming up.
Hey, I defer to you, Jennifer, and
Okay.
to you guys. If you're getting this question,
Yeah.
I don't get this question. I don't hear about this issue.
Right.
It's not something that is on my radar, other than to the degree you bring it on it. So I defer to whatever you guys think.
The main thing about this is so that anybody who looks at their ballot with the barcodes can be confident that those barcodes are not being manipulated in a way that doesn't actually reflect their vote.
I mean, I'm all for getting all the information out there
Yeah.
and so that people can understand what
And
the barcode is and how it works. I'm all for
And
it.
our poll workers need to have that assurance that,
You're right.
hey,
Definitely.
this is legit.
Yeah, definitely. And understand, I agree, how it works and why it works that way.
Yeah.
They're
that's
our
great.
biggest advocates.
Yeah.
I
For
mean,
sure.
they see what happens at the polls and what they do, and so we want to give them, that reassurance that our ballots are counting correctly and that the way the elections are set up. And so I was going to add this to our agenda for our training.
Oh,
for
I
our
think
poll
that's
workers.
great.
So,
Super.
okay.
Yeah.
Other business? Other business?
none.
Not for me.
Okay.
Public comment? No.
We are adjourned.
Cool.
We'll give you that.
I'll go home and
Okay.
find my phone.